Hello, and welcome back to PhDear Diary. I'm Andy Salkeld, and this is my video diary whilst I'm doing a PhD at Leeds Beckett University. I am in the School of Psychology, and I am investigating and researching organisational climates and their impact on mental health. And I say this because I'm actually finding areas of interest. If you've been following, I've been kind of going through a bit of rediscovery about what I'm interested in doing, what I'm wanting to find out more about. And this week has it's cemented a lot of it, but it's brought up more questions, which is kind of what you'd expect from something like this. It is a huge topic. So in kind of the abstract, there is organisational culture, organisational climate, and what drives those and how those influence things. So I've been kind of building a bit of a theoretical model about how these interact with one another. So where I've been kind of going is saying, right, I am looking at climate. So organisational climate is about perception within an organisation. And this is a bit I find fascinating because it was born out of my master's research, where it basically kind of showed that perception was very different from the reality of a situation. People perceived others as being worse than their own beliefs and so on. And that, I think, is very crucial in this because organisations can influence a lot of things, but what people perceive is very hard to influence. And it's about kind of through demonstration and stuff like that. Organisational culture, on the other hand, is more about shared assumptions and beliefs about what is in the environment, and it's kind of done through story and passing on tradition, and organizational culture kind of comes to be as the organization has solved problems from external forces. But some of the main parts that I find the difference interesting is that organizational climate is often studied quantitatively. So this is through kind of surveys, like numerical analysis and so on. And it's also a lot of climate studies focus on the impact on an individual as a result of the climate that exists. And climate studies don't question the climate, really. They just say, well, this is the climate that is perceived, and therefore, how does this influence an individual outcome? Culture is more about what is created by the people within the organization. And there is a lot of overlap between these, but trying to separate them out is kind of very important from a methodological standpoint, and also from my point of view, a measurement standpoint. Because one of the things I'm interested in doing is trying to measure these aspects of a business and how they impact upon an individual within the business. And what I've also looked at in my theoretical model is what drives the culture and climate within an organization. And there was kind of two very central theories to this. So one of them is about the structure of an organization. And this often gets simplified into being whether it's mechanistic or organic. So mechanistic cultures are tall, and there's lots of lines of communication, and like most things are standardized, formalized, etc. Organic is typically wide, where things are more fluid. There is kind of one leader, and then people are allowed to solve the problems in their own way rather than necessarily following a set kind of guidelines by the rules and everything like that. So that's kind of one of the things I'm considering. And then another one is leadership, because obviously leaders and like people with authority within an organization help, like the term I always use is set the tone. So they lead by example, but there's actually different types of leadership. So there's authoritarian, coercive, and I'm trying to think of them. There's another 4, but they've blanked from my mind. But yeah, so it's how those different types of leadership also impact upon culture and climate within them, and then how they lead into mental health related outcomes. And then the bit that I am most interested in, the bit that I find fascinating, that is kind of my like, I want to understand this, and it may not come to anything. That is one of the things with research, is sometimes you don't necessarily get a significant result. But what I'm interested in is whether the organisational attributes, as I call them, so this is things like what's the revenue structure, what's the funding provider, what's ownership look like, and so on, and how do those feed through. And they may not, but on a conceptual level, as I've discussed on this previously, an organization that is driven by results and driven by kind of a time frame, as is the case often with private equity investments that are 3 to 5 year kind of event horizons, you say, right, well, everything is now time pressured, and time pressured builds a climate of pressure and results orientation within a business. And it kind of forces a, I'm trying to think what the quarter of the competing values framework is. Market. It forms a market culture because it's all about external growth driven. And if those feed through into the outcomes of the individual, then it's an important thing to recognize, because if this is something that's going on, this is kind of the esoteric part of the organization, is it has been invested in. And if an investment changes the way an organization runs, operates, the culture within, the climate that's perceived, etc., then owners, managers, business partners, etc., all need to be aware of how this changes for their people. And what I'm caring about is the output, is the outcomes for the individual. And I've kind of expanded my thought a little bit on this. So my first thought was just look at kind of stress, mental health outcomes, depression, anxiety, and attitudes towards mental health, stigma, and so on. But now I'm kind of like, well, actually, there's other things that are important and relevant that can be measures of these things. So a good one would be job satisfaction. So, or also intention to leave. Because if you can see that there is a connection between, say, a negative culture or a negative climate and an intention to leave, then if an organization undertakes an assessment tool and they say, well, actually, we've got a negative climate, that probably implies people are looking to leave, they can do something about it. And similarly, where people have high job satisfaction, they're very likely to stay. I've also expanded my concept of mental health outcomes to include burnout. So burnout is it's kind of very much a modern illness where people are struggling with work pressure and so on, and they are pushing themselves to boundaries that they are not comfortable with and so on. So this is something that I've kind of expanded upon, and I think it's important to do that. I've been going through kind of big literature searching right now, and there is so much to read. There's so much literature out there that it's very hard to know kind of when to stop and when to just be like, no, I've settled, I'm happy with this. Because for the most part of this week, I was kind of like, no, I just want to focus on climate. I want to look at organisational climate because perceptions are what matter to me. However, when I think about it, culture is just as important because those are the assumptions and so on. Those are the assumptions that people have. And what I've been trying to wrestle with was how can I keep my studies and my investigation straightforward? How can I keep them simple without kind of ending up with 200 question surveys and things like that? And this is where the competing values framework came in. And I've mentioned that a couple of times before. But basically, it's a measure of culture in a way. But it also can be used to, or has been used in some studies, to connect to climate. And I think if I can ask questions about where organisations sit within the competing values framework, like whether they are more clan or market, etc., or the other two that I'm struggling for the names of, then I'll be able to kind of say, right, well, there is a connection between these two different cultures and climates. And if we can find that, then we can say, well, actually, they're more connected than the disparate historic research has said. And there has been kind of a claim for a more integrative approach. So that's kind of where my thoughts have been this week. It's obviously very hard to kind of settle anything down. I had a 2-hour meeting with my supervisor where I kind of talked through my thoughts. And I basically said that this is what I'm thinking. And we started talking about, well, actually, this could be too big. So now I'm thinking, well, how do I refine it? How do I keep it smaller and so on? And I think that's a problem to solve in a couple of months once I'm kind of settled on these are the bits that I care about, because it's about finding what matters at this point, or at least to me. And I think that's where I'm focusing my work. I'm giving myself until the end of March to finalize these ideas, and then in April I'm going to be writing up my confirmation of registration, because this is a kind of process you have to go through to kind of say, this is your title, this is your question that you're answering, and this is what you're going to be spending the next 3 years on, ideally with some studies highlighted and some kind of thoughts around it, which is why I'm so focused on kind of building out this knowledge now. As I build out the knowledge, then I refine what I'm considering, and then I can go from there to kind of expand it into actually doing the studies, actually talking about it with organizations and with people that are involved. And that's one thing that I think I should really specify. A lot of research on culture and climate is focused within an organization. So they pick an organization, probably that they're affiliated with in some way, shape or form, whether it's the university or the individual researcher, and they study within that organization and they look at the culture and the climate within. Whereas because I'm more interested in the individual outcomes, I'm more wanting to consider a cross-sectionally, so across many organizations, and then say, okay, well, can we find similarities across multiple organizations where people are perceiving the same thing or making the same assumptions? So whether they perceive a similar climate to one another, or whether they are being a part of similar cultures to one another. And this led to a very high level thought that maybe it is possible for people to experience or to perceive the same organizational climate even when they are not part of the same social setting. And that's a very complicated thing to kind of get your head around. I don't know whether it's true or not, but it's certainly a concept, because if you can generalize like that, you can apply a survey instrument or a study instrument within an organization and say, okay, well, your people are on average or on aggregate perceiving this. Across multiple other situations, people or employees that are perceiving climates like this are experiencing these outcomes, mental health related outcomes. And therefore, you can kind of put a nice little number next to it. It's a risk assessment in a way. And I don't know whether this is the right way to think about it, but that's kind of the output I want to get out of these things, or out of doing this. Like, can we actually create something universal rather than context specific? So that's where I'm thinking of with this. There's still a lot of researching. I'm in kind of constant discussion with my supervisor, like, am I going in the correct direction? Am I doing this? Am I doing that? What's right? What's wrong? But broadly it's going okay. I feel like I'm in the right ballpark now, and that I'm just needing to narrow down, get my measures sorted, and get the overall theory figured out. And once I've got that, then I can design the first study. And when the first study is out and being collected, when people are doing it and actually submitting responses, etc., then I'll be able to then I can start doing the write-up part of this initial research, which is very much I just need to deep dive into as much literature as possible, which I hate, by the way. I think it's important to note that I am a doer. I am not a completer finisher. So this is my absolute nightmare right now, because I like to have the thought, pass it on to someone else to do, and then go and solve the next problem, and so on. Whereas this is very much you need to be immersed. So I am learning personal skills as well as research skills and so on. So this isn't just about development of a concept or development of a tool. This is about developing myself as a person, which is something I enjoy, but I'm also, like, I would consider myself quite late on in life, and therefore I know what I like, I know what I want to do, and I know how I want to do it. And I just want to get out there and start talking about this stuff and start getting companies, individuals, people involved. Because if it can make a difference to one person or to one organization or to anyone, then it's got to be worth doing. So that's kind of where I am in the research. Outside of that, it has been a broadly quiet week. I haven't really been doing that much. I spent a day playing games with a friend on Saturday, and then it's just been chill. the world first race for World of Warcraft, Sepulchre of the First Ones, is out, which is kind of exciting to watch, but you've kind of got to understand what's going on. I've been playing a lot of Mythic Plus in WoW. It's certainly the content I enjoy the most, although I kind of feel hindered by my class, which is a Warlock. And otherwise, things are pretty good. I haven't been on top of my exercise as I've wanted. I've kind of let myself slip on that, but at the same point, I've just been busy. And as such, it's been kind of like, well, I'll get to it when I can. But that's something I want to pick up on and get more structured about, where I am just going daily and so on. My brother is getting married towards the end of the year, and I would like to try and look good in whatever smart attire I am required to wear. But yeah, other than that, everything is pretty good. I'm going to look at lowering my medication for my depression. I spoke to my psychologist about this, and he seemed to agree it was fine. Sorry, not psychologist, psychiatrist. I'm going to get this right. And was happy that we looked to reduce it slightly. So that's great. And yeah, I want to spend some more time with my friends and some more time with my family. But in general, everything's pretty good. So thank you very much for tuning in, listening, etc. And I will make sure to share more of this as things go on. I will see you in a week, and thank you very much.